The hallway at Westfield High buzzed like an electric wire. Lockers slammed, backpacks thudded against tiled floors, and a murmur of hundreds of students merged into one chaotic, living pulse. Emma Rivera, new to the school, navigated the crowd carefully. She was small, her dark hair tied in a neat ponytail, her backpack tightly strapped to her shoulders, but there was an air about her that made her stand out. Not because of confidence, but because of how carefully she measured each step. She had survived countless first days before, different schools, different cities, but today felt heavier, somehow. She clutched the straps of her bag as she approached the center of the hallway, trying to ignore the curious glances of other students. New students at Westfield High usually faded into the background. Most didn't last a month without someone testing them. Emma, however, wasn't most students. That's when Tyler Granger appeared. He was like every description Emma had heard. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a grin that carried the weight of too many years of being feared. His reputation had followed her from the rumors online. Pranks, shoves, verbal assaults, the type of student who thrived on the discomfort of others. And now, he was moving toward her, each step deliberate, like a predator circling its prey. "You're new," he said with mock surprise, blocking her path. His eyes scanned her from head to toe, lingering in a way that made her stomach tighten. "Let's see if you survive your first day, newbie." Before Emma could respond, his hand shot out. She barely had time to react as he shoved her hard against the lockers. Books spilled from her backpack, sliding across the floor like fallen soldiers in a battlefield she hadn't volunteered to enter. "Hey, watch it," Emma exclaimed, more out of habit than hope. The surrounding students erupted into laughter, some pulling out phones to record. In seconds, what should have been a private humiliation became a spectacle, perfectly crafted for viral amusement. Emma's cheeks burned, but she didn't cry. She didn't stumble back or plead for him to stop. Instead, she froze for a moment, her mind calculating, fingers tightening around the straps of her bag. Her eyes darted at her watch. A small, almost imperceptible smile curved her lips as she whispered under her breath. 3 minutes. To everyone else, she seemed like a timid, fragile target. But inside, she was anything but. Emma had prepared for this. Every detail of her first day had been carefully planned. Every camera placement, every angle, every moment of potential confrontation had been accounted for. She was not just a new student, she was a strategist, and Tyler was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. Tyler shoved her again, this time harder, laughing loudly as he did. "What's the matter, little girl? Gonna cry?" he taunted. His voice echoed off the lockers, drawing even more students into the spectacle. Phones hovered in midair, waiting for the perfect viral moment. Emma bent down slowly, picking up her scattered books. She didn't look angry. She didn't look scared. Instead, her voice barely carried over the din, calm and deliberate. "Brother, report ready." The words barely registered to the crowd. To them, it sounded like a whispered threat, maybe an inside joke. But Emma's words were a signal, a code that would trigger a response Tyler could not anticipate. Hidden in her bag was a small earpiece, tiny enough that no one would notice. A soft, steady voice whispered back, almost inaudible, but crystal clear to her. "Target identified. Ready to move in." Emma straightened, slipping her books back into her backpack with precise movements, each action measured, controlled, deliberate. She met Tyler's gaze, calm and unwavering. The laughter around them faltered, just slightly, as the aura of control began to shift, though nobody yet understood why. Tyler stepped closer, trying to intimidate her with a shove and a sneer. "You think you're some kind of hero? You knew. You're weak," he jeered. Emma didn't respond. She didn't flinch. She simply adjusted the straps of her backpack, giving Tyler the smallest hint of a smile, the kind that can either seem innocent or utterly chilling, depending on who's watching. It was the smile of someone who knew something you didn't, something dangerous. And at that exact moment, none of the students recording, none of the people whispering in corners, had any idea what was about to happen. The quiet storm Emma had set in motion was about to change everything. Tyler Granger, the school bully, had no idea that his first shove on the new girl was the beginning of the end. Because Emma Rivera was not just new to Westfield High. She was ready. The hallway had shifted. Laughter and whispers still bounced off the lockers. But now there was an edge of unease creeping through the crowd. Emma's calm, almost eerie composure had unsettled Tyler for the first time. He straightened, trying to regain dominance, brushing off the lingering shock of her silent defiance. But then a new sound pierced the chaos. A soft click, like the metallic whisper of a door opening somewhere just beyond the hallway. Tyler's grin faltered. He glanced around, trying to locate the source, but found only students gawking and phones pointed directly at him. "Who's there?" he barked, the bravado in his voice masking the slight tremor in his hands. Emma didn't answer. She only tilted her head slightly, her eyes scanning the crowd with calculated precision. Then, from the corner of the hallway, a shadow detached itself from the mass of students. "Report complete," a low, controlled voice murmured through Emma's earpiece. Her eyes flicked toward the source of the sound. A figure emerged, moving silently but with purpose. Broad shoulders, a long coat brushing the floor, a presence that seemed to warp the energy around him. He was taller than Tyler, more imposing, yet calm. A predator disguised in casual anonymity. Tyler noticed him last, and the instant he did, a flicker of panic crossed his eyes. He tried to mask it with a smirk, but it failed. Who are you?" Tyler stammered, his usual confidence slipping like sand through fingers. "Wrong target," the figure said, his voice low, deliberate, carrying a weight that made the hallway feel smaller, tighter, more dangerous. His eyes locked onto Tyler with precision, and suddenly, Tyler was no longer in control of the situation. Emma's brother, Alex Rivera, stepped fully into the hallway. His movements were smooth, unhurried, but every step seemed measured, like a chess player moving a piece only when the timing is perfect. Students instinctively took a step back, creating a semicircle of silence around the confrontation. Phones still hovered, but even they seemed to hesitate, as if sensing the shift. Tyler raised his hands defensively, though it was clear he had no idea what he was defending against. "I don't. You shouldn't have touched her," Alex interrupted, calm but cold, each word precise, controlled. "Not today. Not ever." Emma's expression softened slightly at the sound of her brother's voice, though only just enough for Tyler to notice. The smile she had worn was no longer eerie. It was a signal, a confirmation that the plan was unfolding exactly as intended. "Plan?" Tyler echoed nervously, stepping backward as Alex advanced another few steps. The students watching felt the tension spike, like the air itself had thickened. Some phones slipped from nervous hands. Others continued recording, capturing a moment they might not live to forget. Alex didn't rush. He didn't shout. He simply let Tyler stew in the growing realization. He had misjudged the new girl. Emma was not alone, and the person standing before him was not someone to provoke. "Back off," Alex said, and it wasn't just a command. It was a force, a statement of undeniable authority. Tyler froze, unsure whether to run, fight, or melt into the background. The instinct to bully, to dominate, to laugh at the new girl had been stripped from him in an instant. A few students whispered, some gasping, "Is that her brother? And what does he do?" The tension was palpable. Every eye in the hallway followed Alex's slow, precise movements. Even the air felt like it was holding its breath. Emma, meanwhile, stepped slightly behind him, her hands folded calmly in front of her. She watched Tyler like a hawk observing prey that doesn't yet realize it's trapped. She didn't need to act. She didn't need to speak. Her presence, combined with her brother's, was enough. Tyler's face went pale. He glanced around, realizing that the laughter had completely died down, replaced by a charged silence that screamed of imminent consequences. No one stepped in his favor. The power dynamic had shifted in seconds. Gone was the feared bully, replaced by a trembling figure at the mercy of something far beyond his reckoning. Alex took a deliberate step forward, each movement measured, each inch of his approach radiating control. The hallway felt smaller. The walls seemed to close in on Tyler. He knew, in the core of his being, that he had miscalculated. He had targeted the wrong person. Emma's whisper in his earpiece echoed softly, just audible to him. Target neutralized. Tyler's legs wobbled. He looked between Emma and Alex, understanding finally, and far too late, that he was no longer the hunter. He had become the hunted. And in that instant, the crowd around them sensed it too. A new energy had entered Westfield High, a force precise, silent, and lethal in its control. Tyler's first shove, his cruel laugh, the phone's recording, none of it mattered anymore. The wrong target had been chosen, and the consequences were already in motion. The hallway held its breath, waiting for what came next. Tyler's knees felt weak, almost as if the floor itself were betraying him. He had faced countless small storms in high school, mockery, fights, the casual cruelty of popularity. But nothing had ever made him feel as small, as exposed, as utterly powerless as this. The hallway had transformed from a chaotic crowd into a stage, and every eye was locked on him. He tried to speak, tried to summon some spark of authority, but his voice came out as a strangled whisper. I don't. Alex's gaze cut through him like a blade. He didn't need to raise his voice. Every student in the hallway could feel the weight of his presence, the cold precision in his calm demeanor. Alex took another measured step forward. The sound of his shoes against the linoleum echoed faintly, sharp and deliberate, each tap like a countdown. Emma, still a step behind, studied Tyler with an almost clinical focus. Her expression was calm, but her eyes, bright, piercing, reflected a depth of intelligence and patience that made the situation even more terrifying. It wasn't just that she had support. It was that she had planned every detail. Tyler had walked straight into it. You think this is funny? Alex finally spoke, his tone smooth, like ice sliding over steel. You think bullying someone, humiliating them for fun, will go unnoticed? Tyler swallowed hard. I didn't mean... You didn't mean? Alex's voice carried the faintest trace of amusement, though it was sharper than any weapon. You did it. That's enough. A few students exchanged nervous glances, whispers rising like static electricity through the air. Phones continued to record, though many were lowered now. No one wanted to get involved, yet everyone wanted to see what happened next. Tyler's bravado was gone. His usual smirk, the mask of superiority he wore so comfortably, had slipped entirely. Sweat prickled at his hairline, and his hands trembled slightly. He glanced at Emma, trying to understand how she had the courage, or perhaps the audacity, to summon this storm. Her calm stare was unnerving. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was certainty, a quiet confidence that seemed to pull the atmosphere around her into alignment. Alex stopped 2 steps away from Tyler, close enough that Tyler could feel the pressure of his presence. Not threateningly, not violently, but with undeniable authority. Listen carefully, Alex said, his voice soft but commanding. What happens from here is your choice. You can step back, apologize, and start making amends. Or you can continue down this path, and the consequences will find you. Tyler's eyes darted around the hallway, seeking escape, finding none. The students weren't moving. The doors to classrooms were closed. The noise outside the hallway muffled. He was trapped, literally and figuratively, at the mercy of someone far more controlled, far more dangerous than he could comprehend. Emma's voice finally joined in, soft but cutting. You thought this was a game, that you could intimidate me, and everyone else here would just watch and laugh. You were wrong. Tyler's breath hitched. He realized, too late, that every smirk he had thrown, every joke he had whispered behind her back, every shove in the hallway, they had all been noted, calculated, recorded. Emma didn't need to act. Her brother didn't need to strike. The tension alone was already dismantling him. Alex took one more step, closing the final distance. Tyler could now feel his cold, unshakable presence in the space around him. Every muscle in his body screamed fight or flight. Yet he found himself frozen, unable to act. You're going to learn something today, Alex said, calm and measured. Not because I want to punish you. Not because Emma asked me to intervene. but because you need to understand actions have consequences. And when you underestimate someone, you get burned. Tyler opened his mouth to protest, but nothing came out. The words were gone, swallowed by the oppressive authority in front of him. Emma stepped forward slightly, and Tyler felt a sudden chill, like the calm before a storm. She didn't raise her voice, didn't yell. She simply walked closer, her eyes locking onto his with a precision that felt almost surgical. "You can still fix this," she said quietly, almost softly, yet Tyler could hear the razor-sharp edge beneath her tone. "Or you can let it end badly. Your choice." The hallway was silent. Students watched, phones lowered, but cameras still rolling, sensing history unfolding. A few whispered to each other, shocked that someone had finally challenged Tyler so openly. Tyler swallowed, his mind racing. Pride, fear, desperation, everything collided inside him. He could see his options: fight, run, beg, lie. But none seemed viable. Every instinct told him that the force standing in front of him was unyielding, inevitable. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. He could feel the weight of every action he had taken, every cruel joke, every push, every snicker, all reflected back at him through the cold eyes of his target and her brother. And in that moment, he realized something terrifying. This wasn't just about Emma anymore. It was about understanding that power could shift suddenly and irrevocably, that a predator could become prey, that plans, no matter how meticulously crafted by the bully, could unravel in seconds if met with precision and control. Tyler's hand shook. His voice cracked. I'm sorry." Emma didn't smile. She didn't relax. She simply nodded once, a subtle acknowledgement that Tyler's first step toward reckoning had begun. Alex's gaze softened fractionally, just enough to let Tyler sense a faint mercy. But the silence that followed was not forgiving. It was a lesson, heavy and undeniable. Actions have consequences, and Emma and Alex were only just beginning to teach him that. The students exhaled collectively, the tension breaking slightly, but the electric charge remained. Phones buzzed, fingers hovered, whispers circulated, but everyone knew. Something had changed at Westfield High. Something fundamental. Tyler realized he had survived the first wave, but survival was only the beginning. The bell finally rang, shattering the silence like a cannon in the hallway. Students scattered in every direction, some still whispering, some hurriedly checking their phones. The recording of Tyler's confrontation with Alex and Emma had already begun to circulate in the digital veins of Westfield High, spreading faster than wildfire. Tyler remained frozen for a moment, unsure whether to follow the crowd or retreat into the shadows of the lockers. Sweat clung to his hairline, and his chest heaved as he processed what had just happened. Pride, always his armor, had been stripped away in front of everyone. He felt exposed, humiliated, small in a way that even his previous victims had never made him feel. Alex and Emma walked calmly in the opposite direction, side by side now. The hallway seemed to part for them, an invisible current guiding their movement. There was no triumph in their expressions, only quiet control, a reminder to everyone watching that authority did not always come from who shouted the loudest or hit the hardest. By the time Tyler reached the stairwell, his phone vibrated incessantly. Messages, notifications, videos. He swiped frantically, each new message stabbing like a blade. "Dude, saw what happened? Wild. Bro, you got owned. Are you okay?" He realized that humiliation wasn't just in the hallway anymore. It had been captured, replayed, and analyzed in real time by the entire school. The digital footprint was permanent. He had underestimated not just Emma, but the inevitability of consequences amplified by modern technology. In the following days, Westfield High became a different place for Tyler. Students no longer avoided him out of fear. They avoided him because they had seen him undone. Whispers followed him down every corridor. Lunch tables he had once ruled with casual dominance now subtly shifted to avoid him. Teachers noticed the change too, though none directly intervened. They had seen bullies humbled before, but rarely with such dramatic precision. Emma, meanwhile, walked through the hallways with quiet confidence. Her presence was felt rather than announced. She didn't gloat, didn't openly mock Tyler, but the way students instinctively offered her space, deferred to her opinions, or quietly sought her advice, made it clear she had shifted the balance of social power without a single shout. Tyler's attempts to reclaim authority were clumsy. He tried jokes, empty threats, and even sporadic acts of kindness, all met with skepticism or outright laughter. The more he tried to assert himself, the more evident his desperation became. Emma and Alex didn't need to act. Their mere existence in his awareness, the memory of that hallway confrontation, was enough to dismantle him slowly but surely. It wasn't long before Tyler realized that his humiliation had consequences beyond the school walls. Social media posts had spread to other districts. His online gaming friends messaged him, some taunting, others genuinely concerned. He could feel his reputation, something he had spent years building, crumbling like sand through his fingers. Every misstep became a lesson, every rumor a weapon he could no longer defend against. The ripple effects extended to his personal life, too. At home, he grew quieter. His parents noticed the change, but couldn't pinpoint its source. Friends who had once laughed with him began to distance themselves, unsure whether to side with the past or align with the undeniable new reality. Tyler felt himself slipping, the familiar structures of control that had sustained him now unreliable. Emma, however, remained an unshakable constant. She had no need to gloat because she knew that her work was meticulous, deliberate. Every action Tyler had taken against her, every insult and slight, had been cataloged in her mind. She didn't seek revenge for its own sake. She sought understanding, a lesson in accountability that Tyler desperately needed. Alex, in contrast, played the role of silent enforcer. His presence was a subtle reminder that consequences were not arbitrary. Tyler had seen the precision in his actions, the cold calculation, and now understood that power was about more than muscle or bravado. It was about timing, awareness, and the ability to remain calm when others faltered. Westfield High, as a community, began to adjust. Students whispered about the reckoning in hushed tones, using it as a benchmark for behavior. Teachers subtly changed seating arrangements, giving Emma a position of subtle authority in group projects. Even the school's social dynamics shifted, a wave of empathy and caution rippling outward as a result of Tyler's downfall. Yet Tyler himself refused to disappear entirely. He tried to reassert control through subtle manipulations, small acts designed to regain influence. But each attempt was met with failure. His classmates had witnessed the unraveling, and no amount of charm or intimidation could erase that memory. Tyler began to realize something terrifying. Control, once lost, could not be easily reclaimed. It could only be rebuilt, painfully, deliberately, and with a humility he had never known. The tension between Tyler and Emma simmered just below the surface. There was no outright confrontation, no explicit challenge. Instead, it was a game of anticipation and restraint. Tyler learned to measure his words, his actions, his presence. And Emma, always a step ahead, observed silently, waiting for the precise moment when her next lesson would be necessary. One afternoon, during a group project in the library, Tyler made a subtle mistake, a sarcastic remark aimed at undermining Emma in front of others. The reaction was immediate. A few students rolled their eyes, others glanced nervously, and Alex, silently present at the edge of the room, gave Tyler a look that froze him mid-sentence. Emma didn't respond verbally. She simply leaned back, her calm, measured stare doing what no words could. Tyler felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the sense that he had once again stepped into a space he did not fully control. The ripple of consequence had reached him again, subtle but undeniable. It was in that moment Tyler realized his reckoning was ongoing. It wasn't a single confrontation, a single lesson. It was a series of ripples, extending outward, touching every aspect of his life. And he was powerless to stop them. Westfield High had changed, and Tyler, for the first time, understood the full weight of accountability. Actions, once taken, could not be erased. Words, once spoken, could not be unspoken, and power, however temporary, was always vulnerable to those who wielded it with precision and patience. As he walked home that day, alone and contemplative, Tyler's mind replayed the hallway, the whispers, the weight of observation, and the unrelenting calm of Emma and Alex. He felt the sting of humiliation, yes, but also the more profound realization. Growth often came through discomfort. And for Tyler, discomfort was now unavoidable. The weeks following Tyler's initial efforts at change were deceptively calm. While he had begun to rebuild his reputation, the social environment of Westfield High was never static. Old tensions simmered beneath the surface, and Tyler quickly realized that progress would be tested, not just by his own actions, but by the reactions and provocations of others. It began subtly. During lunch one day, a group of students he had previously antagonized whispered near his table. Tyler felt the familiar sting of scrutiny, the instinct to respond defensively. He paused, inhaled, and reminded himself of the discipline he had been cultivating. Instead of lashing out, he smiled politely and returned to his conversation with Emma and Alex. The whispers continued, but his restraint shifted their tone from scornful to tentative. It was a small victory, yet it carried the weight of significance. Tyler was learning to navigate tension without reverting to his old habits. Not every challenge was so minor. A major test in science class created tension between Tyler and a rival, Marcus, who had long resented Tyler's previous arrogance. When they were paired for a lab experiment, Marcus immediately attempted to dominate the process, dismissing Tyler's suggestions. In the past, Tyler would have reacted with ridicule or manipulation. Instead, he paused, listened carefully, and proposed a compromise, an approach that balanced both their ideas. Marcus resisted at first, but Tyler's calm persistence and willingness to credit Marcus's contributions gradually shifted the dynamic. By the end of the lab, their project was not only successful, but executed with an unexpected level of collaboration. Tyler felt a quiet satisfaction. This was the first time he had experienced a conflict, not through confrontation or intimidation, but through patience and cooperation. Emma observed these developments closely. She didn't comment directly, but her subtle gestures, a raised eyebrow, a brief nod of acknowledgement, provided Tyler with a sense of validation he had never known from her before. Her presence reminded him that true influence was earned quietly and consistently, not demanded. Alex, too, continued to serve as an unspoken benchmark, showing through example that authority and respect could coexist without fear. But Tyler's transformation was tested most harshly during a weekend basketball game organized between classes. He had been invited to play, a tentative gesture from classmates who were curious if he had truly changed. The game began lightheartedly, but old rivalries resurfaced quickly. A minor collision on the court sparked shouts and insults, and Tyler's instinct screamed for retaliation. He froze, feeling the surge of old anger, and then deliberately chose restraint. Instead of responding with aggression, he extended a hand to the other player, helping him up. The act, simple as it was, shocked those around him. Murmurs spread across the court, some skeptical, others impressed. Tyler realized that his reputation, once a weapon, could now be an instrument of goodwill, but only if he remained vigilant. Back at school, the ripple effects of the basketball incident were evident. Some students began to approach Tyler more openly, testing boundaries, but doing so with cautious respect rather than fear. Teachers noticed his consistent efforts to collaborate and mediate conflicts, and a few began to rely on him as a peer leader in group assignments. Tyler felt the gradual shift of perception, yet he remained aware that one misstep could undo weeks of progress. Simultaneously, Tyler grappled with internal challenges. Old habits, conditioned by years of pride and impulsivity, were not easily erased. There were moments when sarcasm slipped through, when impatience flared, and when the urge to control a situation returned with force. Each time, Tyler confronted himself with unflinching honesty, analyzing the triggers and reaffirming his commitment to growth. He began to keep a mental journal, reflecting daily on successes and missteps and identifying areas for improvement. Amid these struggles, Tyler also deepened his understanding of empathy. He began to notice the small burdens carried by classmates, stress, insecurities, and quiet fears, and realized that his previous disregard for others had blinded him to these realities. By listening and offering genuine support, he discovered a sense of connection he had never experienced. The rewards of this empathy were subtle but profound. Small gestures of gratitude, cautious smiles, and the gradual dismantling of barriers he had once assumed were permanent. However, not all tests came for peers. Tyler's parents, who had long tolerated his arrogance and rebelliousness, began to notice subtle changes at home. Their recognition was tentative, sometimes skeptical, but it reinforced the idea that transformation required consistency across all aspects of life. Tyler found that acting with integrity outside of school was equally important. His personal growth could not be compartmentalized. By the end of this period, Tyler had begun to internalize a critical lesson. Progress is fragile, and trust is earned through action, not words. Every interaction became a microcosm of his journey, each choice an opportunity to reinforce the new patterns he sought to establish. Emma and Alex remained pillars in this process, not through instruction, but by embodying the principles Tyler was learning to adopt. Yet Tyler understood that the journey was far from complete. He had faced initial tests of patience, empathy, and self-control, but larger challenges awaited, situations that would question not only his behavior, but his values, loyalty, and courage. How he would respond to these upcoming trials would ultimately define whether his transformation was genuine or merely superficial. In this way, Part 6 marked a turning point. Tyler had begun to navigate the complex terrain of social dynamics with awareness and intention, but the true crucible of change, when his principles were pushed to their limits, was yet to come. For the first time, he realized that the measure of character was not in intentions alone, but in the consistency of action under pressure. The weeks following Tyler's incremental successes brought both confidence and a sense of impending challenge. Westfield High was a world in motion, and Tyler knew that real transformation could only be tested when stakes were high, when old conflicts collided with new responsibilities. That test arrived unexpectedly during the annual inter-school debate tournament, an event notorious for rivalries, tension, and scrutiny from the entire community. Tyler had been selected to represent Westfield High on the debate team alongside Emma and Alex. At first, he had hesitated. Public speaking had always been a minefield for his past impulsiveness. But he remembered the lessons learned over recent weeks: patience, preparation, empathy, and restraint. If he could harness these principles under pressure, he could prove to himself and others that change was genuine. The day of the tournament was tense. The auditorium was packed with students, parents, and teachers from various schools. The opposing team, led by Marcus, the same rival from science class, made his entrance with the same competitive glare Tyler had faced before. The memories of past confrontations whispered temptations of pride and revenge, but Tyler focused on breathing steadily, channeling energy into preparation rather than reaction. The debate began. Tyler's team faced aggressive arguments and sharp retorts from their opponents. Marcus attempted to provoke Tyler through subtle sarcasm and questioning his credibility. Each time, Tyler paused, considered his response, and replied calmly and logically. His words were measured, confident, and respectful, a stark contrast to the defensiveness and arrogance that had characterized him in the past. Emma and Alex worked seamlessly with him, their teamwork exemplifying the harmony Tyler had long admired. Midway through the debate, Marcus launched a personal jibe, reminding the audience of Tyler's past mistakes. The room fell silent, the weight of judgment palpable. In the old Tyler, anger would have flared, sharp words would have cut, and the confrontation would have escalated. But the new Tyler inhaled deeply, acknowledging the comment without defensiveness. He redirected the argument to the topic at hand, framing his point with evidence and logic rather than emotion. The audience responded with respect. Marcus faltered, visibly frustrated by Tyler's calm, unwavering composure. By the final round, the energy had shifted. Tyler's team had demonstrated not only intellectual strength, but composure, collaboration, and integrity. When the judges announced Westfield High as the winners, applause erupted. Tyler felt a surge of validation, not for the trophy, but for the proof that he had fundamentally changed. The respect he had earned from peers, teachers, and even former rivals was now undeniable. After the tournament, the atmosphere among students shifted perceptibly. Tyler was approached not with suspicion or fear, but with admiration and curiosity. Conversations flowed more freely. Friendships began to form where walls had once existed, and the lessons of restraint and empathy became contagious. Even Marcus, once a source of tension, offered a handshake and a quiet acknowledgement of Tyler's growth, a silent tribute to the power of change. Back at home, Tyler reflected on the journey. He had faced tests of character, temptation, and social challenge. He had faltered at times, yes, but he had learned to confront mistakes with honesty and to act with integrity consistently. The transformation was not sudden. It had been gradual, requiring mindfulness, patience, and courage, but it was real. Tyler's parents noticed the change too. Their pride was evident not only in words, but in gestures. Fewer arguments, more collaborative conversations, and appreciation for Tyler's thoughtful approach to problems. Emma and Alex continued to serve as guiding influences, yet Tyler understood that his journey now had its own momentum. He had internalized lessons that would shape him long beyond high school. In the weeks that followed, Tyler embraced his new role as a positive influence. He mentored younger students, mediated conflicts, and contributed to group projects with a focus on collaboration rather than control. The respect he earned was now voluntary, not demanded. He discovered the profound satisfaction of earning trust and admiration through action, rather than through fear or dominance. Ultimately, Tyler realized that growth is an ongoing process. Challenges would continue, and mistakes were inevitable, but the principles he had cultivated, patience, empathy, resilience, and integrity, provided a solid foundation. The past, once a source of shame and conflict, had become a reference point for understanding and improvement. Tyler's journey was no longer about winning battles or gaining superficial recognition. It was about becoming the person he aspired to be and influencing others positively. As he walked through the halls of Westfield High one afternoon, Tyler felt a quiet confidence. He knew the journey of life would continue to test him, but he now possessed the tools to face those trials with wisdom, courage, and heart. The story of his transformation was complete, yet the lessons of growth, empathy, and integrity would continue to unfold every day. The end. If you enjoyed Tyler's journey from conflict to growth, don't forget to subscribe and like for more inspiring stories and life lessons.